Friends, 20 years ago, London hosted a historic concert which called for our freedom. Your voices carried across the water to inspire us in our prison cells, far away. Tonight, we can stand before you free. We are honored to be back in London for this wonderful occasion, celebration. But even as we celebrate, let us remind ourselves that our work is far from complete. Where there is poverty and sickness, including AIDS, where human beings are being oppressed, there is more work to be done. Our work is for freedom for all.
President Mandela. But as I said, he was indeed very unique in many ways. His loyalty to his principles made him strong to the good people of the world, and they equally remained loyal to him. His capacity, his power of empathy, his psychological understanding into the pain of humanity was such that he just couldn't abdicate his responsibility. He was too sensitive to it, and this in effect kept him also very loyal to the people, not just in South Africa, but even internationally. And I'm saying so because while the good people of the black South Africans were struggling to push that regime off their necks, the international community, from Africa right into the West, East, in various parts of the world, were becoming alive to the struggle in South Africa. And I remember there was one particular president who was subsequently even assassinated, Olaf Palmer, because any time the international climate, political or some incidents happening elsewhere would want to cover up the struggle in South Africa, Olaf Palmer would raise it up again. So he was clearly making enemies who thought he ought to be silenced. But the interesting thing about it is, as the bipolar world was collapsing and the unipolar world was beginning to over-accept itself, President Mandela finally became the one voice, the strong focal point of conscience that called them to order when they were engaging in their excesses in Iraq again. And he did that because he had cultivated a relationship with the good people of the world while he was in Robben Island, and the news was getting out, and up to the point of where he had to get out, or he had to be pushed out. Let me explain that. This freedom fighter, this humanitarian, had been labeled by the West as a communist and as a terrorist. But close to 27 years, the news was beginning to get out. And what made it even worse for the Western audience was that as the so-called evil empire of Ronald Reagan was beginning to collapse. All that it stood against were beginning to collapse. We were left with now only two naked, brutal, incidents or events happening in the world. That was the persecution of the Palestinians and the persecutions of the blacks in South Africa. The world is supposed to be changing. The evil empire is supposed to be out of the way or collapsing. So what are these two still doing on our screens? Who were supporting them while calling others the evil empire? Now, that's when I think Americans, the American citizens, began to wake up to what could be wake up to the double standards of American foreign policy. And as they began to take to the streets, that's when I think Reagan must have realized that the die was cast and he had to let go. Because if he hadn't let go in time, I'm saying that the American citizens would have gotten a taste of what the unpleasant side of America's foreign policy. And he obviously must have decided to nudge the lady in England, Margaret Thatcher, to also let go. As to whether they would have allowed him to be released as early as they did, is what I'm not too sure. But when blacks and whites began to take to the streets in New York, that's when it became quite clear, even before it gathered momentum. And that's why I want you to understand that President Mandela had nurtured, and the world's good people had also, there was a mutual trust between the people of the good people of the world and President Mandela, not just those in South Africa alone. So this was a relationship. This was based on principles. He had become the conscience of the world. Priests most priests are held in high moral esteem. So was Mandela. But the difference between Mandela's and those of priests and bishops and whatnot is because the passion that the people were holding on to Mandela was such that he was not just a political moral force, but what's the word? He wasn't just an upstanding, morally conscious president, but he had become a force. He could move mountains.